Hi, it's Mr. Adams here, a mathematics teacher with over 20 years of experience. In this video, I want to lay the groundwork for the type of solutions that are actually possible to actually solve housing affordability. Now, we got to get some principles together, otherwise, we're not going to be able to work towards a solution at the end. From the outset, I want to make it clear what a solution looks like for me, and that is to have a high percentage of people owning their own homes, and this would be achieved through lower house prices. There are 6 general approaches that I've identified. One would be to make it easier for people to own their own home. We can make it more difficult for investors to own extra homes. We can encourage investors to sell their extra homes. We can increase the supply of homes. We can create less demand for homes. And finally, we can do nothing, which is something that I discussed in a previous video. Here's a series of ways that we can make it easier for first home buyers. We could have first home buyer grants, we could have small deposit loans, exemptions from stamp duty, or using your superannuation. Big advantage of this approach is that politically, this is the most palatable option. Disadvantage is that it simply just doesn't work and drives up the price of housing. In a future video, I'll go into this in more detail. When we look at previous attempts, they have only increased the price of housing and advantaged investors. Let's look at another type of solution, which is to make it more difficult for investors. This can be through either increasing taxes or decreasing tax advantages. The advantage of this is that it is an effective way of increasing taxes on those who can afford it the most. Its biggest disadvantage is that it targets the people that have the greatest power to lobby governments against such changes. When we look at previous attempts, they rarely get to the stage of implementation. Bill Shorten wanted to change negative gearing capital gains tax and lost both the 2016 and 2019 elections. A very different approach would be to encourage investors to sell. So this can be increasing tax advantages to sell and also to create other investment options. There can also be some education about other investment options, because what could be happening at the moment is that people investing in housing when better investments are available to those people. So the advantage of this is that it's barely been tested, and there are some ways we can have investors exit the housing market without them being penalised. The biggest disadvantage is that it just requires a different way of thinking to what we've previously encountered. As far as previous attempts go, there has been some tax advantage for people to downsize, but essentially this is an untried and untested area. Increasing supply is a solution which I'm sure you've all heard about, which includes building more homes and making homes or land available that is currently not being utilised. The advantages of this strategy is that there's minimal change from existing owners, and there's also broad support for the concept. There are some disadvantages to this concept. There is a limitation of how quickly we can build. Finding available land requires either higher density that is generally opposed by residents, or more farmland being created into housing estates. It seems like for my whole adult life there's been an undersupply of housing in capital cities. Now billions have been invested and will continue to be invested, so there has been a lot of money thrown at this problem. Flip side of increasing supply is to create less demand, and we can do this in a couple of ways. We can have more people live in existing homes, or we can restrict the population growth. The key advantages is that it requires less houses to be built, making supply housing easier. Having more people live in existing houses means that they're closer to existing services, so it generally reduces the pressure to create extra infrastructure. The disadvantages is that it requires a rethink of how we see society. So this includes how we live together in homes to how we manage population growth. As far as previous attempts, there's no overall population plan that I'm aware of. People have created some interesting cohabitation strategies, but nothing to my knowledge has been seriously pushed. Final strategy that I want to look at, I explored in my previous video, and that is to let the market self-correct and to stop interfering in a way that is counterproductive for housing affordability. The key to this is that when the housing market starts to fall, we let it happen. The biggest advantage of this strategy is that it doesn't actually require anything extra to happen. It just requires both the government and the Reserve Bank to do nothing when house prices go down. The biggest disadvantage here is that it requires a new way of thinking. So when house prices go down, we're going to see that as a good thing rather than a bad thing. So this is why I set out in my previous series on housing affordability, why it's actually a good idea when house prices go down. This idea has never been pursued in my lifetime, if at all. So in conclusion, housing affordability to me is a high percentage of home ownership through the lowering of house prices. There are 6 general types of strategies to get there. Now, some of these are more effective than others, and I'll focus on some more than others, and that largely comes down to how much I can inform the debate. So a bit of a spoiler alert, I don't know what goes into building a house, so I'm not going to be really talking a lot about home building. I'm going to be talking more about taxation, which is something that I do have a better understanding of. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Please leave a review and a comment. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a mathematics teacher for a passion for teaching financial literacy. Please read the disclaimer.